Lisa and I wanted to start the coffee chat kitchen table conversation with goal one in RDI. And it is, and we've placed it here so that you can see it: recover, restore, and understand. And the reason we wanted to call this a coffee chat kitchen table was that we just want to have a talk. It's not about the PowerPoint. It's not about bullets. It's just about living it in your kitchen, your dining room, your playroom, because we've lived it in our homes as well. So that is why we're taking this approach, and kind of a casual approach even, Lisa, to what we're doing. So we're going to talk about recovering, restoring in your daily life and how important this is. And Lisa was telling me, and I thought this was really interesting when you said it, Lisa, that this isn't something that people talk about a lot when it comes to autism. The need for the parents, the guides, to recover, restore, and understand. And I thought that was a brilliant point. It's not something that's talked about, is it?
No, not at all. And in fact, the emphasis on the parent isn't placed at all when you receive a diagnosis for your child. And in fact, it can really pretty much just knock you right on your butt. But the professionals, the well-intended professionals that I encountered, basically, they talked about all the things that I should do. And they gave me a plethora of recommendations that was exhausting. And it didn't take into account the crisis that I was thrown into in the first place as a parent, and now how I needed to be able to really slow down and really take into account all that meant for me and my family and our future. I think it's normal, though. I think that every parent is going to go through that process of crisis, no matter, kind of how smart they are. They're just going to, because their dreams are, the dream of having a child and what that will bring is really just been crushed. I mean, to some people to a greater extent than others, but no less, it's that dream is been, it's been crushed.
I think that's a really important point. I think also, and I know I felt this way, there's this lack of recognition of a need to recover, that there's something, you're aware, like you said, that this thing has happened, but you get so focused on what you need to do with your child right now that this is, for lack of a better word, skipped. And I don't just mean skipped in conversation, but I mean skipped emotionally. You know what I mean?
I do. And I'm just remembering about, and sometimes it's actually a favor or a blessing for families to not be able to get that diagnosis for a while, because they can brace themselves. They can prepare themselves for it. I remember being at the local children's treatment center, and we'd been part of this multifaceted kind of an assessment approach that lasted 12 weeks. It was quite a good program that they had way back then. And there was this one family that had gotten the diagnosis. We all got them within the same week, and we'd all been kind of brought together for this process of 12 weeks. And I remember this poor family, they had been given the diagnosis of autism and they didn't even know what it was. They'd never even heard of it before. They were from another country, and it just wasn't something that was well known there. And I can remember, even though I'd also gotten the diagnosis, I remembered being thankful that I at least had a chance to kind of brace myself. So anyway,
I think that's key. And I think it reminded me of this quote from Dr. Gutstein about this whole goal, and that intuitive parenting becomes distorted no matter how good a parent you are with autism. And that affects you as a parent. And we know that by 12 months, all that natural intuition as a parent is just, in some cases, I feel like it's just going away. Like it's leaking out, one might say. And that is not about whether you're a good parent or not parent, though it can have the impact on you as a parent of feeling like you're not a good parent. So that just adds on top of it, Lisa.
Most definitely. Being a parent of 2 children with special needs, I had really no idea how to parent. I just was in survival mode constantly. I spent a lot of time running errands and putting my kids in those double carts.
Well, and this creates an unavoidable crisis. And we have to recover from that. You can't have a crisis on one hand that you don't recover from. I mean, you can have a crisis you don't recover from, right?
Right.
Can, but we have to see that it creates an unavoidable crisis and that we do have to recover with that. And we do that with hope. And I love your story of hope and how you came to that hope through RDI. Because you talk about how you came to that understanding that there was hope, and you have to make that discovery.
I certainly did. And prior to that, I think I was in perpetual crisis for a very long period of time. I had lost my ability to intuitively know how to parent my children. I was doing too many things at one time, and I couldn't do any one of them well. I spent long hours, sometimes into the wee hours of the morning on the internet, looking for options to try to help my kids. I was anxious. I worried an awful lot. I was constantly thinking about autism. I was over-reliant on the other professionals to help my children. That was a really vulnerable, scary place to be. I remember one therapist leaving my home in a snowstorm and standing at the door and praying to God for her safe return, because I thought she was the lifeline to curing my child, or she and the other gals. And they were wonderful people. Don't get me wrong, but to feel that reliant on other people to help me with my own child and to not feel competent myself, that was really scary. So when I found RDI, I knew it was just like this aha moment, this discovery, seeing Dr. Gutstein talk about the irony of it. He was actually, one of the moments that really stood out for me was he was talking about the long-term outcomes studies. And maybe you remember it, Kat. It was called the NAS study. And the results of high-functioning individuals with autism and Asperger's. They did this independent study of I can't remember how many people were involved in it, but it was a substantial number. And they looked at various things, like they're basically their quality of life, their ability to live independently and hold down in employment and have relationships, marriages, these kinds of things. And the results were really dismal. And I remember seeing Dr. Gutstein talk about this in the 2-day workshop that I'd seen him speak at in 2003. And I was elated, because I thought somebody is thinking about these things. Nowhere in the other program that we were doing were they thinking about the long-term outcomes of the therapy that they were doing. And I thought, finally, somebody is actually creating a program that is going to address that. So that was one of the first things, but that started to give me hope. And so fast forward to when I actually started an RDI program, and I was phasing out those therapists. And I remember one day they left my home, and I thought to myself, bye-bye. Bye. I was so ready, I was so ready to really parent my kids, to do what I always dreamt of doing. That's why we become parents. We want to parent our kids. It's pretty simple. But autism robs us of that.
And yet we know that there's a way back. and that we have to go through that process. And it's one thing we wanted to say tonight with our coffee or tea or what have you,
Right.
was that there is a way back. Trying to avoid denying that there's been a crisis or to think one shouldn't think of oneself. One of our principles is that we're in a parallel process. So what's affecting us is affecting our children, and denying we're being affected is affecting our children. So recognizing that is that step to hope. And so that's one of the things we help parents do. All parents, Lisa, I would say, are at different places in this. When they come to us, and we, each other, have a different story, but it's still, as Dr. Gottesdien says, an unavoidable crisis that has to be addressed. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we talk about it. As we said in the beginning, you noted that it's just not talked about. And so from crisis to restoration, I can have influence on the development of my child. What a powerful statement that is. And he follows up with that no one really explains what autism is to parents. Or if they do, they don't explain it well. Well-meaning, I'm sure, professionals, but either it's communicated, Lisa, as a communication disorder or a speech delay or an academic. Parents from the get-go are not explained to what it is, and that makes it very hard for them to understand that they can have influence, because their influence isn't even discussed, right?
That's right. And that was the other thing that was so really appealing about RDI, was that I was going to, when I was saying bye-bye to that person who, had left my home, I didn't know everything that I knew I was going to learn, but I knew I was going to. I knew that I was on a journey that was going to lead to a real level of competency and ability to raise my kids. And it was the discoveries that I had along the way are still some of the most vivid memories that I have as I started to adopt an RDI style of living, of parenting. And it was really amazing and so incredibly empowering. I actually remember a friend of mine. She has a child who has a special needs, but it's a completely different type of a very rare genetic disorder. And they adopted a different type of approach that, really worked for their child with his particular needs. But nonetheless, she had become an expert parent, and so did I. And one day over a conversation, we were kind of venting a little bit about some of the teachers that we were encountering. And, again, I don't mean to bash teachers or anything, but my friend, who's very loving and kind, she said, Lisa, we have to remember that they really don't hold a candle to us. And she did not mean it in a negative light at all. She was saying we have to have some compassion for where they come from, because they're not parents of our children, and they haven't been on the journey that we've been on, and they're not the mommy warriors that we've become, that are just so empowered and so knowledgeable. We've got this. We know what we're doing. So I thought that was really sweet that she was saying that we should afford them a little extra slack.
Well, and I think it's such a good point too. If you think about a teacher or a therapist or a doctor, among the many professionals that see our children, they have an identity in that. What happens to us as parents is, because of this, for lack of a better word, stripping away, it strips away not only what's happening to our child, but our identity as a parent. And it's really important to know that happens, so that you can understand, as you came to know, that there's a restoration to you of your identity, and that's what's happening to you. And the restoration is that you can influence the development of your child. Can a teacher influence the development of your child? Yes. Can a therapist? Yes. Can a doctor? Yes. But it's incredibly important for our identity as parents. This is all parents. So if you're a parent of a typically developing child, it's you too. It's incredibly important that you have that personal agency and that you know that you have that identity to have that influence. I think it's really, really a beautiful part of our plan.
It is interesting because I think that I've often heard that parents don't make good therapists, but I don't think any of us want to be a therapist. We want to be a parent. It doesn't mean that we can't be a mindful parent, that we can't be aware of the beautiful steps in development that I think are so often hard to understand in terms of what's missing and and how to sequence that. And that's where, a consultant comes in, as they really help that parent find that path that's going to be customized for their child and where they're at in that journey.
I think so. And I think one of the beautiful things about what we do is, Lisa, how we always say each child is unique. There's no two the same. Well, if you're a parent, that's true of you too. You're a unique individual. There are no two of you. Every parent is different, and you have your own road, and what happens to your child affects you in its own unique way. And that's the beauty of what we do, is we look at that restoration of so whoever you are, what you would have with your typically developing child. And that includes the empowerment as a parent that comes naturally to parents, the instincts, trusting your instincts. I have parents talk to me about their gut. Lisa, my gut told me this, but I didn't think I should listen to it. That's that instinct. That's that empowerment of your instincts. And sometimes in this process, it gets, again, stripped away. At least your confidence in your gut gets stripped away. I don't think it's so in us. I don't think the gut actually gets ripped out, but that's an imagery, right? But I think we doubt it. That's the stripping that takes place. So recovery is the restoration of that. And I encourage everyone to really think about that and how important it is. Because the first step is recognizing that these things that they exist, that this is true, and that this path of typical developing has been changed for you in terms of how you're thinking about yourself as a parent, but we get ourselves back onto that road.
And it just makes sense that parents be the ones to really become the agent of change for their children because of their role and biologically and physiologically and emotionally, they're the most connected to their child. And in fact, nobody, doctors and teachers and other, therapists, yes, they can have an influence on our children, but nobody's going to be as committed to our kids as, a parent is to a child. And that's for the long haul, so.
And as it should be, I tell parents, and that's as it would be, that we would be for the long haul, most committed. And knowing that I have an influence, that through my interactions, I have an influence on my child, that gives me that sense of personal agency. That we talk about babies being born, Lisa. Well, this sense of agency as a parent is born when the babies are born. And so we're restoring that. Sometimes people ask me, Lisa, well, tell me how to do it. How do I restore this? And a lot of times I find that for parents, the actual restoring begins with recognition of what it is that was stripped away, why they're feeling the way they do. Even some people tell me what they were feeling because they couldn't identify it. And that identifying these points that we've talked about tonight brings them to that place where they start restoring. So it's a beautiful process, but it is a process. It's one step at a time.
And it's different for every person, because some people take it on like from where I came from, I was really ready because I think I had become, I was over reliant. I had done a lot of other things before I'd found RDI. And so I was really ready. And so that restoration, I think, came pretty quickly. However, I know that for some families, sometimes it's kind of scary to think about, well, you mean it's kind of up to me? And it's settling into a feeling of not knowing, to the uncertainty. And I often liken it this way for families. I tell them that they're going to experience some feelings of incompetency when they first get started, because there's a lot to learn with RDI, but we're going to take it in a step-by-step approach, a manageable approach. We're going to develop some good communication. But in this process, they're going to feel a little bit incompetent as they gain, traction and greater competency. And I explained to them that they give themselves they cut themselves some slack in a new job when they, it's to be expected that they're not going to know exactly what to do from the get-go. Well, this is the same. This is also something new that they're learning. And I've asked families that have been on the journey for a little while as well, okay, so what was more difficult, the new job or RDI? And it's interesting because often the families will say RDI. And I will say, well, why do you think that is? And they kind of look at me, they're not quite sure at first. And I said, it's because you love your child so much. There's this, you love your child much more than that job or, whatever, but it's just that, it's that emotional piece, that love that you have. It just, sometimes it's a little scary, when you add that emotional component. So I think that's helpful for families too, just to know that it's a journey, and that's often how I explain it.
And you are not on that journey alone.
That's right.